Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this November 24, 2014 edition of Nightcast. A volcano has erupted on Cape Verde island of Fogo, resulting in the evacuation of hundreds of residents and the closure of a local airport. A huge plume of smoke, which was visible from Ring Island, started to rise from the Pico de Fogo volcano yesterday. Officials have said that they think this eruption was bigger than the one which was in 1995. The Cape Verde archipelago, the coast of West Africa, consists of volcanic islands, 8 of which are inhabited. That's our opening story for tonight, friends. In our next story, we go to the Iranian nuclear talks. Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif, you see on the screen behind me, said he was hopeful a political agreement could be reached. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani said a deal was close. Now, that's really laughable because U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry warned that several points of disagreement remained. 6 world leaders want Iran to curb its nuclear program in return for the lifting of economic sanctions. Tehran says it is not seeking nuclear weapons. But friends, remember, we've been playing and reminding you of the words of former U.S. Secretary of State George P. Shultz, who spoke on this. When did he do that interview? It was either November or December last year, 2013, just a few days after the November 24 talks began. George P. Shultz, in an interview with the BBC, said that Iran will smile at you, send you on your way, cut your throat. Then, on December 11, I remember that date well, we were able to get video of a live transmission on Syrian television. Now, it was in the Arabic language, but those of you who have seen it, we played it again last week. We played it in December last year. We showed you the former advisor to the advisor to the former Iranian president, who got on television live in Syria and said, "We tricked the world leaders." He said, "We told them about this uranium we had over here at a certain low level that we agreed to reduce by 20%, but we didn't tell them about this other uranium we had over here at a higher percentage, and we're still working on that underground. And when we develop a nuclear weapon, then with equal footing, we'll finish the negotiations." So, and this same man you see on the picture behind me, the Iranian foreign minister, Zarif, he appeared on television just days after the November 24 Geneva talks began last year in 2013, and said the 6 world leaders recognized the right of Iran to have nuclear power, atomic power. And was anybody listening? He didn't say we agreed. He didn't even mention agreeing to reduce that uranium they told everybody about at a certain low percentage. He didn't even mention an agreement to reduce that by 20%. And of course, he doesn't tell you about this stuff that the advisor to the former president says it's hidden underground and it's at a higher percentage, and we're still working on that, and we're getting that thing headed up toward a nuclear weapon capability. And as you'll hear tonight you will hear Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu say, remind everybody that, look, Iran has been building and launching international ballistic missiles. He said, there's only one purpose for an international ballistic missile. It's to carry a nuclear warhead. Why else would you have an international ballistic missile? What the very, very, very ballistic means. So they have a goal of developing this hidden uranium at this higher percentage into full nuclear weapon capacity. So all this other stuff is just, like George P. Shultz, former Secretary of State for the United States, said, they'll smile at you, send you on your way, and cut your throat. You know, it reminds me, there is a Bible verse that says, those who smile at you and then stab you in the back, and that those people that do that are contrasted to the wounds of a friend as being loyal and real and faithful, and you know that the wounds of a friend are better than the guy that smiles at you and then stabs you in the back. And here you've got these smiling cutthroats lulling everybody to give them more time and release their sanctions too. You're going to hear in this news report just exactly how many dollars per month and per year, per month, what do you hear the figure, that's being released to Iran while there's no deal, while they're just agreeing to, we'll finalize a deal at some point in the future. Well, excuse me, you know, I should have been laid down firmly that we'll lift your sanctions if you get rid of the nuclear program, period. Otherwise, we're not lifting those sanctions. But you got this administration in power in Washington now that blank, blank, blank. I'm going to let you fill in the blanks. I mean, you can make a good conclusion by listening to the rest of tonight's news and just keeping your eyes on news daily. 6 world powers want Iran to curb its nuclear program in return for the lifting of economic sanctions. And because of that, they've allowed Iran to just lull them to sleep while Iran keeps on working on that atomic power hidden away, like the advisor to the former president said on Syrian television. That's in our archive. I played that for you last week. I played the whole thing in December, just a few days after it aired on Syrian television. And that's in our archive back in December 2013. You can watch that entire thing. And, you know, if you're interested in this and really praying about this, you should. Tehran says, like George P. Shultz says, doesn't smile at you, send you on your way, and cut your throat. Tehran says it's not seeking nuclear weapons, but wants atomic energy. What for? You know, the 6 countries that are called the P5+1. The P5 are the U.S., the U.K., France, Russia, and China. They're called the P5 because they are part of the Security Council of the UN. The +1 is Germany, which of course, is not part of the Security Council of the UN. The UN, from its foundation and beginning, was formed because of what Germany did during World War II as an enemy of the Allied powers, who became part of the UN Security Council. So they're the P5 of these 6 nations, and Germany's involved with this as well, interestingly, and it's the P5+1. I'm going to contrast to something you'll see when John Kerry speaks in a few moments. You'll see on the front of his lectern E3 and then EU. We'll look at that in a moment when that slide comes up. But the P5+1 have been in negotiations with Iran to finalize a preliminary deal reached last year in Geneva. A preliminary deal reached, which was just, we're going to release so many millions of sanctions to you each month if you'll agree to agree to a deal. No deal. They've now agreed to extend discussions with the aim of reaching a high-level political agreement by the 1st of March 2015, and then and confirming the full technical details of the agreement by July 1, 2015. By July 1, 2015, Iran would be allowed to continue accessing $700 million, the equivalent of 450 million pounds a month in frozen assets during that period, for just having a deal that says we agree to agree. But you release those sanctions, and if they don't agree, try to get what you gave them back. Good luck, friends, Let's go to a video. John Kerry said there are still some significant points of disagreement.
But in these last days, we have made real and substantial progress.
Friends, there's more in this video, but I'm stopping it at that point because I wanted that to just sink in to your minds for a moment, what he said. We have made real, significant progress. In all the news I've read today, I've read a lot. I'd like you to explain, Mr. Kerry, what is that real significant progress that you made? I think we just read that you've, and the other 5 nations, the P5+1, have agreed that you'd extend this thing to March 1 for something, and then July 1 for technical details, and good luck drawing that up with Iran, Notice the title on the lectern. Let me pull this forward while we have it in freeze frame, and let me see. Can you at the title on the lectern says E3/EU+3 Iran talks, Vienna. The news has been calling this the P5+1. I explained to you just a moment ago what that means. +1 are the 5 nations that are part of the UN Security Council: the U.S., the U.K., France, China, and China and Russia. The +1 is Germany because it's not part of the UN Security Council. Now, this E3/EU+3, well, the United States would not be considered part of the EU. The UK would. E3/EU+3. I don't know what that means. I'd like to find out. This is on this frame, first time for tonight, and this is from today's news. It's where it says this E3/EU+1, it does not say the P5+1, as the news has been referring to the 6 nations that are trying to negotiate a deal with up to now. Again, the P5+1 means the 5 nations that are part of the UN Security Council, those being the UK, the US, France, China, and Russia. The +1 being Germany, which is not a part of the UN Security Council for obvious reason. The UN was largely put into place because of Germany's role as of the Axis powers and Hitler's Nazi regime that reigned terror over the world during World War II. So of course, Germany was not part of the Security Council. Germany was the monster enemy that caused the UN to be formed in the first place back in 1947, I think it was. Okay, so we'll see if we can find out what that E3/EU+3 means. But for now, we understand that the 6 nations are the P5+1: the U.S., the U.K., France, China, Russia, and the +1 is Germany. All right, now let's let this interview finish, and then we'll tell you what President Rouhani said this evening.
And we have seen new ideas. And that is why we are jointly, the P5+1, six nations, and Iran, extending these talks for 7 months, very specific goal, finishing the political agreement within 4 months, and with the understanding that we will go to work immediately, meet again very shortly, and if we can do it sooner, we want to do it sooner. At the end of 4 months, we have not agreed on the major, if we have agreed on the major elements by that point in time, and there is no clear path, we can revisit how we then want to choose to proceed. Now, we believe a comprehensive deal addresses the world's concerns is possible. It is desirable. And we all have an understanding of what kind of deal could look like, but there are still some significant points of disagreement, and they have to be worked through.
Now, friends, I'll give you an analysis by BBC's Middle East editor, Jeremy Bowen, in a moment. It's pretty good analysis. I'm going to read that to you in just a moment. But speaking in Tehran this evening, President Rouhani, I want to tell you what he said. He said the gap between the two sides had narrowed during the latest round of talks in Geneva. Quote, he said, "It is true that we could not reach an agreement, but we can still say big steps have been taken," he said in the interview broadcast on state television. Mr. Kerry, as you just heard, was more cautious, warning that although substantial progress had been made, there are still, quote, some significant points of disagreement. These talks are not going to get easier just because we extend them. They're tough. They've been tough. And they'll stay tough, he told reporters in Australia's capital. Now here's the analysis by Jeremy Brown, the BBC News Middle East editor, and he was speaking from, writing from Vienna. Jeremy Bowen said, all sides here in Vienna wanted a deal. None of them wanted to walk away from a negotiation they accept as difficult. The reason is that the alternative to a deal might, in the end, turn out to be war. Before the initial agreement in Geneva a year ago, the Middle East seemed to be sliding, Jeremy Bowen says, slowly but inexorably into a war over Iran's nuclear plans. Israel had threatened an attack so many times that the threats were starting to lose credibility, but they still had to be taken seriously, and Israel still views Iran as a great threat. In a BBC interview while the negotiators were talking in Vienna, Israel's prime minister, let me show you the slide I have of the Iranian president speaking this evening on their state television. So just so you got a frame of what that looked like. But while the negotiators were talking in Vienna, Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu once again compared the Islamic Republic of Iran to Nazi Germany. The deal they've been discussing in Vienna is complex, but technical details are not the main reason why they need more time to talk. At the heart of the talks, there still is no agreement on the vital equation, the amount of uranium that Iran would be able to enrich and the extent to which sanctions against it would be lifted. And this photograph that goes with this news story, friends, is captioned in this way. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani said there was now, quote, no doubt that enrichment would continue in Iran. How's that grab your fancy, friends? In a statement, Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif and EU envoy Catherine Ashton said that based on, quote, the new ideas which continue to be explored, end quote, they are convinced a comprehensive solution can be reached. Quote, we intend to build on the current momentum in order to complete these negotiations within the shortest possible time, the statement. You know, friends, it's often true. There's a principle. You know, you give somebody so much time to do something, they take that much time to do it if they do it at all or if they get it completed. They've been given the March 1 and then to July 1. And it'll take that much time before we know, well, did it happen? Although Mr. Kerry declined to comment on the details of the negotiations, President Rouhani said the talks had shown there was, quote, no doubt for anyone that enrichment will continue in Iran. You know, if you listen to all the words of the Iranians, the foreign minister, the current president, the advisor to the former president, well, especially him, he just lays it right out. We tricked those world leaders, and we've got some uranium hidden away at a higher percentage than we've told anybody about. And we intend to make that into a nuclear weapon. You know, when they make these statements that they make, such as this one, there was no doubt for anyone that enrichment will continue in Iran. They just put it out on the table that we're not making any deal to reduce this. We're interpreting the way this is going. Nobody's forcing us to, you just keep giving us more time, so we take it this way. There's no doubt for anyone that enrichment will continue in Iran. Hello, Mr. Secretary of State. Hello, Mr. President of the United States, President Barack Obama. Aren't you really listening to what these guys are saying? They're taking it. There's no doubt for anyone that enrichment will continue in Iran. Back to the news story, friends. The remaining sticking points are thought to be the future size and scope of Iran's capacity for uranium enrichment work, how quickly sanctions on Iran are lifted, unexplained explosive test in Iran that could be linked to a nuclear weapons program. Speaking to the BBC, UK Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond said the failure to agree a deal was, quote, a disappointment, but rather than continue blindly, we have to recognize the reality that we are not going to make a deal tonight, end quote. Under the terms of international treaties, countries have the right to develop nuclear energy, which Iran insists is its only aim. However, the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, says it has been unable to confirm that Iran's activities are exclusively for peaceful purposes. Highly enriched uranium can be used to make a nuclear bomb, but uranium enriched to lower levels can be used for energy purposes. The UN Security Council has adopted 6 resolutions since 2006 requiring Iran to stop enriching uranium with sanctions to persuade Iran to comply. The U.S. and EU have imposed additional sanctions on Iranian exports and banks since 2012, hitting Iran's oil revenue badly. Now, friends, here's the talks turntable. November 24 last year, 2013, a 6-month interim deal was agreed with the aim to reach final deal by July 20 this year, 2014. Then, on the 19th of July, day before they were supposed to make a final deal, the interim deal was extended until today, November 24. Now, today, there's an agreement to meet again in December and extend the deadline for, quote, political agreement to March 1, 2015, and final deal by the end of June 2015. Now, here's the video, friends, of Benjamin Netanyahu, where he's going to say, don't give these violent medievalist atomic bombs.
No deal is better than a bad deal. The deal that he was rushing for was terrible. The deal would have left Iran with the ability to enrich uranium for an atom bomb while removing the sanctions. The right deal that is needed is to dismantle Iran's capacity to make atomic bombs, and only then dismantle the sanctions. Since that's not in the offing, this result is better, a lot better.
But as long as Iran is talking to those powers, is it not succeeding in drawing them somewhat into its territory?
Well, I think Iran should not have any capacity to enrich. There's no right to enrich. You need to enrich for if you're not developing an atomic bomb. They are. How do we know that? Because they're developing intercontinental ballistic missiles. What do you do with such missiles? The only way you build ICBM is to launch a nuclear warhead. So Iran, I think everybody understands, is unabashedly seeking to develop atomic bombs, and they shouldn't have the capacity either to enrich uranium or to deliver nuclear warheads. And I think that's the position that the P5+1, the leading power of the world, should take. What is the justification of not taking this position? They say, well, it offends Iranian pride. So what? I mean, if this position was taken in the 90s against Germany, it would have offended German pride. It would have saved millions and millions of lives. You do not want to give this medievalist regime that faces of women, that oppresses gays, that subject the entire population, that export terrorism far and wide. Don't give medievalist atomic bombs. It's not a good thing for the future of world and its security.
Both Saudi Arabia and Israel are vehemently opposed to Iran acquiring nuclear weapons. In the U.S., 3 influential Republican senators, John McCain, Lindsey Graham, and Kelly Ayotte, called on President Barack Obama to tighten the economic vice on Tehran through new sanctions. And friends, the caption on this photograph that's part of this story it's a map of Iran's nuclear facilities. I'll let you take a look at that for a moment while we get our next story out of Turkey. Oh boy, what a story out of Turkey this is. Kind of a Turkey story of sorts. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said women cannot be treated as equal to men and has accused feminists of rejecting motherhood. Quote, you cannot put women and men on an equal footing, he told a meeting in Istanbul. It is against nature, he said. He also said feminists did not grasp the importance of motherhood in Islam. His comments often seek to appeal to his pious core supporters, says the BBC's Mark Lowen in Istanbul, but they anger more liberal voters. Turks who have more secular views argue that the government's social policies are taking the country in a dangerous direction, the BBC correspondent says. Mr. Erdogan has previously urged women to have 3 children, and has lashed out against abortion and birth by cesarean section. His latest remarks were delivered at a women's conference in Istanbul. Quote, "In the workplace, you cannot treat a man and a pregnant woman in the same way," Mr. Erdogan said, according to the Anatolia news agency. Quote, "Women cannot do all the work done by men," he added, "because it was against their delicate nature." Further quote by Mr. Erdogan, "Our religion regards motherhood very highly," he said. "Feminists don't understand that. They reject motherhood," he said further. He also said women needed equal respect rather than equality. Mr. Erdogan also told the Istanbul meeting that justice was the solution to most of the world's issues, including racism, anti-Semitism, and women's problems, quote unquote. The Turkish leader often courts controversy with his statements. Earlier this claimed that Muslims had discovered the Americas more than 300 years before Christopher Columbus. Well, Mr. Erdogan, Ishmael preceded Isaac by some 11 years. But in spite of that fact, God said that Isaac was the son of promise and not Ishmael. A Muslim, friends, is a person who practices the Islamic religion, which has as its instruction book the Quran, which is a counterfeit, if you can call it that, of the Bible, and not even a credible, provable counterfeit. The Bible contains prophecies that cannot be broken, by which the Bible provides irrefutable proof that it is the word of the eternal and living Creator, like unto whom there is none other. The Quran rejects Jesus Christ as our Savior and relegates him to the much lesser role of prophet and prophet only, and of lower estate than the prophet Muhammad that they honor, that the Muslims honor. Now that's a summary, friends, of what is and what is not with regard to someone's comment on the Muslims having discovered the Americas more than 300 years before Columbus. So what? Ishmael was, again, he was 11 years older than Isaac, but God still chose Isaac to be the son of promise, which promise included the land in the midst surrounding the nation-state of Israel, and land in dispute by so many today. God gave that land to the descendants of Isaac, not Ishmael. He gave Ishmael's descendants other borders to call home. So those who consider themselves to be displaced or refugees in the East, you've got a home, and you should go to that home, which is yours, your own homeland, and have that which God and leave that which God gave to Israel to Israel. Now, friends, I would finish the report on that point tonight. However, there's a very important story in the news, important enough to go beyond my usual half-hour time that I try to more or less go for. Again, some of you have been encouraging me, go for an hour, Steve. Well, I prefer to keep it under that if I can. Sometimes we go 45 minutes. Sometimes I do have to go an hour. But I try to pack it in here for you, plus mention the facts we need to mention that relate news stories to the Bible. This next story, strictly out of the United States. Chuck Hagel announced he is to step down as U.S. Defense Secretary. Chuck Hagel has resigned as U.S. Defense Secretary after less than 2 years in the top post. President Barack Obama confirmed his resignation and paid tribute to his, quote, class and integrity. You know, they have a political way of doing this. He quit because the policies of Mr. Obama, he can't carry on in good faith. Mr. Hagel, 68, a Vietnam War veteran and former senator, said it had been his life's, quote, biggest privilege. Last month it was that he was sharply critical of the U.S. strategy against Islamic State and in relation to the Syrian regime. He will stay on as secretary until his successor is confirmed. An unnamed official told the Associated Press news agency that Mr. Hagel and Mr. Obama both, quote, determined that it was time for new leadership in the Pentagon and had been discussing the move for weeks. Mr. Obama said Mr. Hagel had come to him to discuss the, quote, appropriate time to complete his service. The U.S. president said he was extraordinarily lucky to have Mr. Hagel by his side as defense secretary and praised him for forging a strong bond with U.S. troops. Mr. Hagel is the first enlisted combat veteran to serve in the role. In a brief statement, Mr. Hagel said, it had been the great privilege of my life to lead and, most importantly, to serve the men and women of the Defense Department. We've got an analysis by John Spiegel, the North American editor for the BBC. And then we do have video of Mr. Hagel. He'll speak in a moment. Let me give you this analysis. Chuck Hagel is a friendly, no-nonsense defense secretary. He was also the one Republican in the White House national security setup, but that may be of lesser importance than him being appointed to do one task in the Pentagon, only that the job description has changed fundamentally. He was the man appointed to bring the troops home and pare back the huge defense budget. But then Islamic State came along and all the calculations changed, and Mr. Obama and his defense chief found themselves at odds. There was a lack of clear strategy, perhaps because Mr. Obama and Mr. Hagel didn't agree on what that strategy should be. And after midterm political the president needs a military win. So a chain top will be an important symbol of that determination, which of course leaves did he jump or was he pushed, is the question in the analysis by the writer, by the BBC writer. Probably the BBC writer concludes probably a bit of both. Mr. Hagel, who served as Republican senator for his home state of Nebraska, was for 12 years, became critical of U.S. involvement in Iraq, despite voting to authorize the war. He replaced Leon Panetta as defense secretary in Mr. Obama's second term, taking on the task of winding down the Afghanistan war and making a military shift towards Asia. But the future of the U.S. military policy has changed amid strikes against IS in Iraq and Syria. The next couple of years will demand a different kind of focus, quote unquote, and an unnamed White House official told the New York Times, which first broke the story. The story was first written out, broke from the New York Times. U.S. media report there was increasing tension between Mr. Hagel and the administration over decisions in Syria and working styles, citing Hagel confidants and senior defense officials. Now, what do we have in this next? Let me show you the video of Mr. Hagel speaking, friends.
been the greatest privilege of my life, to lead and most important, to serve with the men and women of the Defense Department and support their families. I am immensely proud of what we've accomplished during this time. We have prepared ourselves, as the President has noted, our allies, and Afghan National Security Forces for a successful transition in Afghanistan. We've bolstered enduring alliances and strengthened emerging partnerships while successfully responding to crises around the world. And we've launched important reforms that the President noted, reforms that will prepare this institution for the challenges facing us in decades to come. I believe we have set not only this department, the Department of Defense, but the nation on a stronger course toward security, stability. If I didn't believe that, I would not have done this job.
Okay, friends, so there you are hearing Mr. Hagel himself on this. As I mentioned a moment ago, U.S. media report there was increasing tension between Mr. Hagel and the administration over decisions in Syria and working styles, citing Hagel confidants and senior defense officials. Former Deputy Defense Secretary Ashton Carter. Friends, here's a listing of the runners and riders for the to take over Mr. Hagel's position. Former Deputy Defense Secretary Ashton Carter, former Pentagon Policy Chief Michelle Flournoy, and Senator Jack Reed. Now, continuing the BBC report, it says here, Republican Senator John McCain said he knew the defense secretary, quote, was frustrated with aspects of the administration's national security policy and decision-making process. Mr. McCain said Mr. Obama needed to realize current failures on national security more often lie with his administration's misguided policies. Well, Mr. McCain being very outspoken there. Mr. Obama did not name a replacement for Mr. Hagel as this was announced today. The nominee would have to be confirmed by the Senate. Among those being considered as replacement for Mr. Hagel's is Michelle Flournoy, the former Pentagon Policy Chief during Mr. Obama's first term. If nominated and confirmed, Ms. Flournoy would be the first female U.S. Defense Secretary. And friends, that's it for this Monday night report here on Nightcast. Thank you for joining me tonight. God willing, and the creek don't rise, we'll be back again tomorrow, Tuesday night, with the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy. We're just 2 days away from Pope Francis speaking on Wednesday before the EU Parliament, the European Parliament, at their headquarters in Strasbourg, France. We hope to be right on top of that on Monday. I hope they're going to have some TV cameras right there in the European Parliament. If I had my wish, I'd love to, if they allowed the press inside, I'd love to be right there as he speaks. But who knows? It may not be a big deal. I'd like to be there because he may say something that actually is a big deal that the world's press won't catch and maybe won't report. But we'll see. Maybe they'll run a live video stream from there, and we'll be able to eyeball and listen to every word he says. That's happening Wednesday. So things are happening this week. Well, again, as I said, God willing, Creek Don't Rise will be back again tomorrow night, Tuesday night, friends, with the day's current news related to the Bible. Until next time, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying, so long, friends, and good night.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.